It's a pretty common sentiment in the community that taking the first two arcs of Dragon Ball Super to remake the Battle of Gods and Resurrection of F was a massive mistake, and I'm not gonna be the one to argue against that. Not only was it a pointless waste of animation, but we're also a massive downgrade from the movies they're based on. That's why it's so lame that said movies were essentially retconned out of existence, meaning the super arcs are what formed the base that future stories would build upon. In this video, the question I want to answer is what might have been different if they hadn't remade the movies, and just immediately started making new content instead. You might say that nothing would change, but that's where I would disagree. The Super version of these stories made quite a few changes that would cause ripple effects throughout all of Dragon Ball Super. Said ripples will be my primary focus, with the alternative side effect that making the series sooner after the movies means Akira Toriyama will have less time to forget important parts of the story. Now, before we talk about how Super would change as a result of this, I want to talk about outside factors. Dragon Ball Super had a notoriously awful production schedule that resulted in the atrocious pacing and visuals of the first two arcs. If they jumped straight into Super exclusive content, then it's likely that the Destroyers Tournament arc would have suffered greatly. In this video, I mostly want to cover the story implications of these changes, so I'll be assuming they're somehow able to pull together a decent show, despite the awful work conditions. Now, if you want to help me keep up my own production schedule, the best way to help me out is to sub and turn on notifications, so you're notified when my new videos are released. Now, to start things off, we need to cover some groundwork. In Battle of Gods, Whis states that Beerus was using 70% of his power during his fight with Goku, but despite stacking Super Saiyan on top of his Super Saiyan God power in the next movie, Beerus is still implied to be stronger. I have a very clean way to make all of this work. Basically, in Battle of Gods, Goku absorbed the Super Saiyan God form into his base, then fought Beerus in his Super Saiyan form. That's what I assume forced Beerus to use 70% of his power. In Resurrection of F, Goku and Vegeta master using God Ki, so their base forms are always Super Saiyan God level. Now, instead of Goku having access to all of his previous super forms, his new base can only handle the first Super Saiyan form, and due to their mastery of God Ki, their hair turns blue. This would mean that Resurrection of F Goku is actually still close to the same level he had during the Battle of Gods. This is a bit of an assumption on my part, but nothing from either movie contradicts this interpretation. So with that basis, let's get into Super. The Destroyers Tournament is still set up the same as before, but once we get into the tournament, we need to go into one of two directions. I believe that when writing this arc, Akira Toriyama completely forgot that Goku and Vegeta were supposed to have God power in their base forms. When I usually talk about Super from this point onward, I tend to assume we retconned away the God and base thing. But here, we have the movies fresh in our minds, so we remember God Ki, and it will continue to be an important part of the story. So the first route we could take when going into this arc is to say that all of the Universe 6 fighters are all just unbelievably strong and can contend with God level opponents. But I actually prefer an alternative route, where the Universe 6 team stays mostly the same, but we get more of the Z fighters involved. We could set up the same situation where Boo fails the exam, but this time Gohan is actually there to watch the tournament, so they sub him in. Now we can have the Frost plotline play out, but we can replace Goku with Gohan, who gets knocked out, and then the fight with Piccolo reveals Frost's deception. Now, instead of Vegeta coming in, we can assume Gohan and Piccolo were both reinstated, so Frost just gets disqualified and we continue. Now we can have some fun hijinks of Piccolo and Gohan taking on the weaker members of the Universe 6 team, until we get to Kaba. Now, we're going to gas up Kaba quite a bit here. We can say Kaba is quite a bit stronger than Gohan, but since he doesn't have Super Saiyan, he's losing their fight. But he's close enough in power that he's able to outsmart Gohan and knock him out of balance. This leads into a slight variation of Vegeta versus Kaba, where everything plays out the same, but Kaba isn't equal to Vegeta in base, ending with Vegeta revealing Super Saiyan Blue, which leads into the fight with Hit, that stays mostly unchanged. Notably, unknown to Goku, after revealing his Kaioken, Beerus acknowledges that Goku has surpassed him. This will be the catalyst for Beerus to secretly start training again. And we move on to the Goo Vegeta arc, which could remain completely unchanged and it would be fine. But instead, I was thinking we could replace it with something better. I think this would be the point that Piccolo would start to take an interest in God Ki, as Piccolo is still always training to be the strongest, just like Goku and Vegeta. We could explore an interesting mini-arc with him, where instead of learning from Whis, he thinks back to his time as God of Earth, and we could learn more about how planetary gods are assigned, ultimately leading Piccolo to something or someone that could help him learn to use God Ki. After that, we move on to Goku Black. Now, as much as I would like to shoehorn Gohan into this arc, that would be straying too far away from the point of this video. So future Trunks returns, and he has his training match with Goku, but instead of seeing Super Saiyan 3, Goku just curb stomps Super Saiyan 2 Trunks in base, just like Goku Black, who then appears himself, and we get the Goku v Goku match. But it's base to base instead of Goku using Super Saiyan 2. He gets sent back, and we have Goku and Beerus going to meet Zamasu. That goes about the same as in canon, but while that's going on, Vegeta trains Trunks, also like in canon. But this time, Vegeta trains Trunks on how to tap into God Ki. He starts to understand, but he hasn't perfected it before it's time to head back to the future, and the arc plays out normally, with the addition of a subplot where Trunks struggles to remain calm and control his power in the face of Goku Black. This all leads into the Rage Trunks moment. The form itself has always looked like an incomplete Super Saiyan Blue, so Trunks' form could represent him tapping into God Ki despite it being unstable, allowing him to hold his own until Goku and Vegeta return. And we could get the rest of the Goku Black arc as normal. I wish we could have Trunks decide to stay in the past, since his world was destroyed anyway, but I'll say again, that's out of the scope of this video. Now we can get into the Tournament of Power. You might think the Zen Exhibition match would be altered, but since Toppo is a God of Destruction candidate, he would also have God Ki, and would be able to perform the same as he does in canon. After that, we don't have long to assemble our team, and I just want to comment about how dumb this part of Super is. The consequences to losing is your universe getting erased. Every time someone goes to recruit someone else in this part of the story, they refuse and need to be convinced to join. Like, bro, it is very much your problem. You will be erased if we lose. The drama has never been so artificial. Now, we recruit basically the same roster as in the original, even though I really want to take Roshi off the team, but I will resist. The big change comes in the form of Piccolo's training of Gohan. In the original, Gohan regains his previous strength, but in this version, Piccolo has been training with God Ki over the past few weeks, so here he can teach it to Gohan. Similarly, just like Piccolo, the other character who actually cares about training and didn't retire would be Ten Shinhan. He hasn't had a chance to obtain God Ki until this point, but this would be an opportunity for him to ask Goku about it. Goku would have to eventually leave to recruit Frieza, but Goku could ask Whis to teach him. You might argue Whis should teach all of the humans how to use God Ki, but there's a few reasons why that wouldn't happen. Firstly, it feels kind of forced. Things only really happen in Dragon Ball if a character has personal motivations to do said thing. Alternatively, Roshi and Krillin aren't prodigies. People forget, but Ten Shinhan was insanely talented during Dragon Ball, and he's likely the only human who should be talented enough to learn how to use God Ki within a day.
But they could use the time chamber.
Well, they could, but they could have also used the time chamber to wake up Boo, and that didn't happen either. So now that we have our team, how strong are they? Well, Goku, Vegeta, Frieza, the androids, and the other two humans are the same. But Piccolo, Ten Shinhan, and Gohan all have entered the realm of the gods. So how strong are they? Well, without going too deep into it, I think that Tien would be slightly weaker than Super Saiyan God Goku during Battle of Gods, while I think Gohan wouldn't have the time to both learn God Ki and regain his ultimate form. So he would have to go into the tournament in a weakened state, meaning Gohan's strongest form would be Super Saiyan Blue instead of the much stronger ultimate form, while Piccolo would likely be close to that Blue Gohan's level. Now, would our stronger characters actually have an effect on the story? Well, not really. Jiren and even God of Destruction Toppo are so overwhelmingly strong that Goku and Vegeta were essentially always the only people who stood a chance at taking them down. But that being said, this is a rewrite based on if the series version of the movies didn't happen, so if we have stronger versions of Piccolo, Gohan, and Tien, then it only makes sense that the writers would give each of them a fitting opponent to fight during the tournament. But who would they fight? Well, Gohan actually doesn't need any changes. He fights Dispo with Frieza in the anime, and that fight never made any sense during Super in the first place. Dispo was set up as an opponent who could keep up with Golden Frieza, so Gohan being able to keep up at the time made no sense. Here, that scene actually works, since Gohan has gained God tier power. You could also even have him regain his ultimate form during the fight, since he's still a lot weaker than Frieza or Dispo. And like how Super Saiyan turns blue when used with God Ki, we could say the ultimate form turns white with God Ki. To be clear, this isn't Beast Gohan. It would be the much shorter ultimate form hair, but white. Then later, when we do get Beast Gohan, you could assume it's a progression of the ultimate form, instead of coming out of nowhere. Now, alternatively for Piccolo and Tenshinhan, I actually think it would be best to write some new opponents for them. There's a few bad filler episodes during the tournament, so it's not hard to replace some bad episodes to give Piccolo and Tien some screen time during the final fight. This actually fixes several problems in Super. It both gives two fan-favorite characters an opportunity to shine, while also giving us a chance to highlight two more Pride Troopers. The Pride Troopers always felt kinda weird. They were basically all jobbers, with the exception of their top three. So here, we can take two of the weaker members and buff them up to God tier. That would mean the Pride Troopers had 5 strong members instead of only 3. During the tournament, our guys could have several mini clashes with their Pride Trooper opponents, ultimately leading into their big fight near the end of the arc, similarly to Goku vs Jiren and Vegeta vs Toppo. But eventually, things would align back into canon, with 17's wish to restore the multiverse. Pretty soon after that, we get Super Broly, but it wouldn't really change much, the only difference being that our Saiyans wouldn't go through the transformation catalog, and would instead only have blue. Now for some manga spoilers. This is your chance to click off. The Moro arc doesn't change much, but due to Moro's rivalry with the Grand Supreme Kai, I think it makes sense to say Moro also had access to God Ki. Gohan and Piccolo already get a cool fight in this arc, and 7-3 scales to whoever strong they are. Alternatively, a God Ki wielding Tenshinhan could likely take on Moro's grunts and wouldn't need Goku to save him. And the rest of the arc progresses normally. Finally moving us on to the Granola arc. This is where things get interesting, starting with Beerus and Vegeta's fight. During this arc, Beerus tells Vegeta that it was him that asked Frieza to destroy the Saiyans. Then he proceeds to one-shot him. This is of course a classic case of Beerus' plot armor keeping him above Goku and Vegeta, but remember, in a Super that stayed true to the original movies, Beerus was surpassed in the first arc of Super. Early on, I presented the idea that Beerus would secretly start training again, and I think it would be cool if Vegeta and Beerus were around the same level at this point. They could have a close fight, but Beerus could ultimately edge out the win due to the boundless power of destruction. This would do a good job setting it up for Vegeta to access it later in this arc. And then we move on to Granola. So how do we handle this guy? I've never really liked the concept that someone could sacrifice their lifespan and surpass Goku and Vegeta, and in this version, where we've continued to highlight the power of God Ki, I think it makes even less sense. So I was thinking, maybe we could introduce something better. Granola could still use the Dragon Balls, but it would tell him it simply doesn't have the ability to make him stronger than Frieza or the Saiyans. So instead, the dragon could tell Granola about a different mythical artifact. We could call it the Hand of Zalama, and it could literally be like a monkey's paw. Now, if you don't know what a monkey's paw is, it's essentially a wish-granting device, but it always comes with horrible side effects. This thematically fits in with the Granola arc, because said monkey's paw could grant him the power he desires, but at a cost. In this version, Granola wouldn't actually know what the cost is, but he would learn what it was near the end of the arc, as he sees gas slowly age into nothing. Most of the arc after that stays the same, but with these few changes, in my opinion, the arc just feels a lot better. Finally, Superhero is a pretty self-contained story, so nothing really needs to change. It would have the minor difference that Gohan would use blue instead of regular Super Saiyan, until he regains his ultimate form, but it would mostly be the same. So ultimately, this mostly becomes what if Dragon Ball Super remembered God Ki exists, while also possibly including a subplot of Beerus getting back in the game. Luckily for him, he's never really that involved in the plot, so even though our guys reached his level pretty early on, it doesn't really come up. Using God Ki as a plot device actually makes it really easy to make characters like Piccolo and Tenshinhan relevant again. It's a shame that Super didn't take advantage of it, having characters just get unexplained power-ups instead. But you know, it's not like this fixes all of Super's problems. If I was going to remake Super, a lot of this might be part of it, but there's still a lot of stuff that I would change. Now, if you were around back in the day, you would know that a lot of my ideas here are based on what fans assumed was the case at the time, because they were just making logical assumptions. But no one can predict a writer who constantly forgets stuff about his own story. It goes to show, a lot of inconsistencies were just caused by negligence and could have easily not happened. But that's just the way it is. Anyways, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time.